The Cuban regime is cracking down on people who took to the streets to protest in the last week after Hurricane Ian knocked electricity out to the entire island. Thousands of people have been taking to the streets demanding freedom. The Associated Press published these photos. Take a look at it. It shows plainclothes government officials attacking a demonstrator during a protest last Saturday. According to the Miami Herald, Cuban independent outlet Catorce y Medio also reported that recruits and plainclothes state security and police officers beat and arrested peaceful demonstrators in the Havana neighborhood of El Vedado, chanting for freedom on Saturday night. With us now to take a closer look at this is Amalia Dache, an associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania Grad School of Education. Amalia, thank you for being with us. You were actually born in El Vedado, in Havana. What's been going on there?
Absolutely, Jose. Right now, en Vedado, en Playa, which is a neighboring neighborhood of Havana, there were protests there this weekend. And what's interesting about these protests that are happening now that are different from last summer is that these are not just marginalized neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods where you had people who in this neighborhood at some point were supportive of the regime. And so now you have Cubans who are across class lines aligning with the protests and aligning with change in Cuba. So it's not any longer just the marginalized neighborhoods that were present last summer. Now we have El Vedado and we have Playa, which are a mix of class and also a mix of people who were supportive of the regime in the past. So absolutely, the protests continue in Cuba, and it's not just a hurricane, it's also the fact that Cuba has been a disaster, a man-made disaster since 1959. So that's the broader impact of this situation in Cuba.
Amalia, I want to take you back to that picture that has been seen around the world of a plainclothes government official, beating a woman in the streets. Is that something that you think
yes,
represents more than just one moment?
Absolutely. This represents the Damas de Blanco, right? So Black women and women who are of African descent, these reports of how they are abused on Sundays when they walk the streets to protest for the freedom of their family in jails in Cuba. So Damas de Blanco, Berta Soler, one of the leaders of the Damas de Blanco, she is constantly being harassed. And so this Black woman who's being beat up in the streets of Vedado is also facing not only political repression, but there is a racial dynamic that I constantly remind my brothers and sisters on the island and in exile that we have to also understand that there is a racial dynamic in Cuba, and we can see this happening in this video, in this image.
Is this, Amalia, a moment or a movement? And we asked you that after July 11th of last year.
This is a movement, absolutely, and we can see the evidence of it coming from the communities of Cubans who've been exiled and are migrants in different parts of the world. In Europe, in Latin America, we have Cubans in Canada pushing their legislators to make policy to understand that the Canadian government should no longer be working with the Cuban regime at all in any kind of business purposes. And so absolutely, this is a movement, and it's a powerful movement led by those of us across racial lines who have been impacted, who research, who work with the Cuban community and with Afro-Latin America.
And Amalia, I want to say that I've been so enjoying your social media posts when you, during Hispanic Heritage Month, you highlight the extraordinary work of Afro-Cubans, many times the forgotten people. I thank you, Amalia, for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jose, for all of your work. Thank you.